Changes of this scope don't happen every few thousand years to mankind. They are events being compressed into a few decades that would ordinarily occupy millennia and many thousands of years. I think we need a few new devices for managing and navigating under these conditions.
McLuhan was describing the changes in society that he was witnessing. He found people were unable to cope with the speed and range of changes that electronic media introduced. McLuhan saw us as stuck in the Gutenberg galaxy.
Everything that we prize in our Western world in matters of individualism, separatism, and of unique point of view, private judgment, all those factors are highly favored by the printed word and not really favored by other forms of culture like radio. When you surround people with electric information, the overload of information becomes fantastic. The amount of information in the environment under electric conditions is many times greater than that of the normal human environment pre-electric.
McLuhan's ideas were radical and controversial, and his contribution was profoundly important. He helped map the contours of changes that are addressed in many information society debates. Today's theorists are building on his ideas about new media and new identities.
McLuhan came up with the idea that the medium is the message. The notion behind that really being that if you change the ways in which you communicate, you also tend to change the contents of communication. And this is why I think he's a very important thinker, because although now it's become a very commonly accepted idea and people tend to use the phrase very quickly, I think in that phrase there is still really the nub of the significance of the changes that we're seeing. Clearly the computer is the #1 technology that has initiated this whole trend towards an information society. The crucial thing that is at work with information technology is speed. You know, in many respects, information technology doesn't really change anything, but what it does do is speed everything up. One significant feature of the internet is the potential, if not always the actuality, but certainly the potential it has to allow people to both produce and consume information. You know, it's obviously a two-way medium. Clearly when you have television, for example, broadcast from a central studio, that's not possible. But the internet in principle does allow people to be both consumers and producers of information, and I think that's again a very full of potential liberating effects for many different kinds of people who have previously very much often been on just simply the receiving end of information coming from elsewhere.
Being able to communicate with others, and not just as a passive receiver of information, is a fundamental change in our patterns of social interaction. This has consequences not just for us as individuals, but also for our communities.
Communities that, have been locked into their own histories, their own economies, their own cultures, and can only reach out because when they have access to alternative models, can gain access to models through the conversations which the internet facilitates. So I think in that sense it builds, if I say global consciousness, global doesn't mean that there are no differences between these different communities that are speaking, but it does connect across globally. Communities that have been previously, I think, very much confined by space.
The information society also poses fundamental changes to how we work and what we manufacture. Daniel Bell has written on post-industrial society.
The main jobs in the latter half of this century will be primarily in services, and the crucial component of services, which are human services and professional services. But in a post-industrial society, nature is excluded, things are excluded. Work is primarily a game between persons.
So how have the changes that Bell describes worked out? Charlie Ledbetter, a writer and cultural critic, describes his everyday work arrangements.
I started my working life as a journalist, and when I started working at the Financial Times, we still printed the paper on hot metal printers, and I would walk out of the building each night and there were people running around with big lumps of hot metal. And within a decade, that had all changed. We were all working on computers. That entire structure of organisation, Fleet Street itself, had completely disbanded. And now I work entirely for myself with a laptop, a modem and a telephone, and basically that is all I need to do my job now.
In debates on the information society, we can identify three core themes: culture, representation and identities, new patterns of work and inequality, and time-space reconfiguration. These are the three main areas you'll be researching this week. So let's review quickly some important ideas that are addressed by each of these three themes. John Barlow has been an important figure in the development of ideas about new communications technologies and their impact on culture, representation and identity. He suggests we're seeing both an explosion and an implosion of new media.
Here we have a medium that, first of all, can incorporate every other medium that ever came before it, ranging all the way from graphics, as in cave paintings, to text, to television, to auditory communication like the telephone, and create integrated worlds in which all these things are together for the first time. I mean, McLuhan used to talk about how each medium would incorporate the previous form, and this one incorporates everything that could be incorporated. It incorporates experience itself.
Daniel Chandler is a new media theorist who studied young people's home pages and has made some interesting findings about how home pages can represent identities.
It both publishes you globally and is thus a very, very public thing, potentially. And at the same time, of course, as with the word processor, it's highly revisable. The web page is much more public and very easily revised. It keeps pace with you in a way that a diary doesn't.
This culture of multiple and fragmented identities may seem rather alien. Wasn't there a time when we all shared a common knowledge about each other and about the world around us?
Vision and sound are on.
I was a deprived child, like everyone else in the early 60s. My home had only 2 television channels. There were only 4 radio stations to choose from, as well as Radio Luxembourg. My children are growing up in a different, a richer world. They already have access to satellite and to cable, to videos, computers, as well as 4 terrestrial channels. And early next century, they're very likely to have access to up to 150 TV channels. And instead of nipping down the video shop, they're going to be able to dial a film straight down the line. Bugger listen with, Mother. This new technology means we have the opportunity not only to listen, but to be heard.
Stellark is a